Okay, Danny M. Goldberg, welcome to Be in Demand. I'm really excited to have this conversation all about people pleasing, communication skills, and the title of your book.
Well,
And I say title of your book because I know the pages that are inside the cover is amazing, but I just also love the name. And as a speaking coach, like I tell my clients who write books, come up with a title that can be your keynote. And you have done that very well. So, Danny, welcome. Let's jump right in.
thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. And first off, let's talk about the book. And how'd you come up with the title? I have to know.
I think the best way to describe it is an accurate depiction of who I am. My kids have told me I'm a little bit of an a-hole all the time, and they didn't take they might have made it insulting at first, but I kind of took it to heart. And really, and there's a couple other people in my life that were very similar, where they're great people, they're extremely nice, they're very respectful, but if you cross their boundaries, it's they turn into someone else. Not yelling, not screaming, but acknowledging the fact that we're not, or we shouldn't cross these boundaries. So I really came up with the title for my kids.
And we should tell the audience, for those that are listening to the audio, what the title is.
Yes, it's a little bit of a hole.
A little.
There's two dollar signs in there because again, I couldn't say the word on the cover, but I can
It's
almost
almost
like,
like a dash. It's almost like you're making a soup or
yeah,
something, and it's like a little bit of salt,
that's exactly
a
just a
little bit
little
of,
bit, just the pitch.
yes. I love that. That's awesome. Let's just talk about assertiveness and how so many professionals, and I just think people in general, struggle with being too assertive. And I think, like for myself as a reformed shy girl, being assertive was, oh my God, she's being bitchy, basically. She's being needy. I mean, there's all these like little stories that I think we come up with in our minds. And I think in the end, you actually weren't that assertive.
Yeah, right. What I've struggled with is I actually, and my kids tell me this, and a lot of my coworkers, I'm too assertive. If I say, "Hey, let's get this done," and they don't get it done, then I continue to ask about it. And I don't try to nag people, but what I've also learned is from feedback from my son and also my girlfriend is the more you push, the less chance of it getting done. So I've learned to give people a little bit of space, but also not get walked all over. It's honestly, it's a fine line we walk on a daily basis to be a people pleaser, be nice, be respected, and also know the boundaries that we have and not to cross them.
So, what do you think the fine line is? Like, how do we share with the people who are listening to this, like, what is that fine line of being not assertive enough, being just the right amount? Oh my God, I'm sounding like the three bears, or too assertive. Like, like, how do we distinguish that? And I think it's going to be person to person, but since you wrote the book, I'm super curious to what you have to say on
It
this.
is, and I would say the right balance is, and I go back to the boundaries, and someone asked me a question before, is like, how do you know when it's time to push back? Time to be assertive. And to me, it's a gut feeling. If I always ask myself, can I live with this decision? Is this a big deal or is this going to bother me in a week from now? And I'm going to go back to this person and say, I wish I didn't do that. If that's the case, then it's time to set those boundaries right now. It's time to be assertive and say, no, I can't do that. And so really, I think it is person to person. It's that gut feeling because with some people in my life, I give them a lot of leeway. I give them way too much leeway. I'm the first one to admit to it. But I do have boundaries still. With other people, the boundaries are a lot smaller because there's history there.
What about with people that you know versus maybe even family, like family versus friends versus employees or coworkers?
When I speak on communication skills, we do an interviewing class and I talk about interviewing from an internal audit perspective. And I compare it to dating because it's all the same. We're trying to establish relationships. Same thing here versus family versus friends versus personal relationships. I think you're going to give certain family members more leeway than others. I think you're going to give certain family members a lot less leeway. I've got one in mind that I don't give any leeway to because there's history there. But I think it's all about that relationship and not what you want to get out of it, but what you want to give as well. my son was actually saying this to me last night. He said, focus on, if you give something, don't give it with strings. Give it because you care and you want to do something. I think that's more than fair. And that's something I've got to get better at. But yeah, I think it's a person to person relationship that's got to be managed. And again, it goes back to, what am I comfortable with? Or is this person taking advantage of me?
Agree. Agree. And I also think and something that I talk about with my clients is what's the intention and what's the emotion? Because I'm going to go back to what my mom used to always say, there's more than one way to say everything. To her, she was always like, there's the right way and there's the wrong way, but there's a way that can be offensive and a way that can be polite. And again, I think it's just really in the moment, knowing, just like you said, it's what is this relationship? Because some people I can speak to very bluntly. And then there's other people I have to be like, hi, how are you? I'm a D on the DISC personality profile. So it's like when I'm speaking to an I mean, I have to, it's intentional that being a little more social beforehand
Sure.
because that's what they appreciate.
So I try to focus my message, and this is the advice I always give my clients, is be tactfully direct. If the person chooses to be offended at the message, that's their choice, but the message is not offensive. Don't lose sight of the message though, because you're soft selling it so much. It's a fine balance between the two.
I did some work at Johnson and Johnson, and I remember one of the executives saying, and we did a leadership development program, and she came in to speak, and she was a tall woman, very pretty, very confident. And she would say, there are two sides to every coin. Some people will take you as confident, and other people you are going to offend. They're just going to think you're a jerk and push back. And she would always say, I had to know the difference, but also her being true to herself, she just knew she was going to offend people.
If you
Mm.
look at that,
Yeah,
confidence versus cockiness, there's a fine line, but I've also learned, I get reviews of my training all the time, and I'd say 99.5% of the time people love it. But there's always going to be a few people, and I don't get offended at that. People don't like my style. I'm a little more brash than some people. I'm a little more direct. You don't like my style, so be it. I appreciate the feedback. But if you try to satisfy everyone, you satisfy no one.
correct. I agree. So what's the difference between confident and being cocky or being a jerk?
Yeah. I continue to go back to the book. The really impetus of the book was my mom taught me, because they were immigrants here. I'm first generation here in the States. And they taught us to be nice to everybody. I was the kid in the class that never got his name on the board, was the nicest kid in the world, but I also found that no girls liked me. I also found that bullies picked on me still because, again, I was just nice and they knew I wouldn't push back. So I probably in college, I kind of developed I'm going to say aura confidence. That's
Mhm.
grown quite a bit over the last 25 years. And it's a really fine line to cross. I want to stand tall. I want to be confident in my words, but I think cockiness comes down to a lot of times when you talk down to people. And so I try to make an effort not to talk down to people whatsoever or point out the obvious. That's unnecessary. Yeah. And and maybe you felt like this when you were speaking a lot. The less I speak, the better I got at speaking. Does that make sense?
Well, that's interesting because I actually might say the reverse. The
So
more
I
I
used to
speak, the
talk.
better I get at it.
Well, okay, no, that's not okay. Let me rephrase that.
Okay.
I always I was always very interactive, but I would talk a lot and I wouldn't allow the audience to get involved as much. The more I speak, the better I get, but the better interaction I get is when I allow people the room to comment, to participate, to interact, because people learn better in those situations than anything else. So the less I speak, the more productive my classes are.
Okay, 100%. When we're allowing the audience to be part of the training, part of the presentation, yep, they feel involved and that they have more buy-in also. Yeah, there's a lot going. Yes, when I first started speaking and I was speaking on leadership and I'm like, oh my God, leadership is so serious. So I had to show up in the suit and I did all the talking and basically I turned into the college professor. I didn't even tell stories back when I was first starting. Now it's like I make sure. my clients use stories and metaphors to really hone in and lock in that message for the audience.
So when I talk to people about speaking, what you just said, if you don't personalize the message, it's not going to work. Now, I've had people and I've had to let go of some speakers before where they go on tangents on these stories and they make no relevance to the point. As long as you come back to the point, eventually people are going to love your stories.
Yes, absolutely. You're reminding me of a time I lost my place. I answered a question during a speech. It was a little bit of my fault. The people who hired me for the opening keynote, and for me, an opening keynote is 60 minutes or less. They were like, "Great, we're gonna have you talk for 90 minutes." I'm like, "Okay, that's a workshop." And so I did have to have little breaks and exercises, and I totally got I forgot where I was. And I just looked down at the nearest table of people, and I was like, "So where was I? What was I saying before that?" And the audience laughed.
Of course.
And I love telling that story because the audience laughed because, "Ha, she's just like me."
It humanizes you, Lord. And I can't agree with you more. I actually do that. I'd say quite often. I always make the joke. I turned 50 about 8 months ago and my memory's going. So I'm like, right away, I was like, what were we just talking about? I do that probably once a month at least. So, but again,
That's
you're
it.
right.
Once a month?
It humanizes you to, yeah, to a point where people feel more connected to you because when you're on the stage, people think, and this is something I don't like either. People look at you as an expert. I'm not an expert in anything. I have a lot of knowledge on a lot of different topics that I want to share, but there's also people in that audience that know more than me, and I want them to feel comfortable giving it back.
Yes. So true. So back to what we were talking about, people pleasing. And how I feel like as entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs as they're just starting out, and actually even people in corporate, when you're new to a company, new to a position, I really do think that we get too much into the people pleasing. Sure, I can do that for you because we're trying to build those relationships. We want to be the new, nice team player in the group or with entrepreneurs. Sure, I can. It's a little bit outside of the scope of work, but sure, I'll do that for you. Like, how do we set those boundaries or at least stop the people pleasing virus?
It's tough. The scenarios you just brought up, when I first started out, I was hungry for work. So whatever you need, I'll take care of it. And I think you grow out of it over time. The best piece of advice I got starting out is bring a product to the table that's unique and don't be the low cost provider. And those two things right away, I think are critical to any successful entrepreneur. But when you're starting out on a new job, one of the goals is to keep your boss happy. But again, I think it's that fine line. If my boss starts abusing that relationship, then I'm not going to keep him happy anymore. I'm going to have to set those boundaries effectively. So I think there is some natural people pleasing when you start out in a new role, but I think you learn who's going to look after you and who's going to take advantage of you. And that's when you start setting those boundaries.
Okay. Do you think that there is a difference in people pleasing, male versus female? More female, like females are more apt to be people pleasers than men. I don't know. I've actually never thought about this
Nor
until
have I.
just now.
Nor have I. I've applied it pretty much the same to everybody. Maybe in the workplace, maybe females are a little bit more prone to people pleasing because they might feel like they have a more of a hurdle to get over because it's a male dominated workforce potentially. But I really haven't looked at it that way. I think it's more personality driven. And for example, my girlfriend, I love her to death. She is high maintenance. There's no doubt about it. And she asked for a lot. And if I didn't set boundaries with her, and even though those are flexible boundaries, if I didn't set boundaries, I told her, I said, we're not going to have a relationship anymore if we continue down this path. And so she doesn't like the serious talks, but I told her, I said, I can't do this if you're going to do this. And if you don't set those boundaries, and it's okay if that relationship fails. I don't want it to fail, but it's okay if it does because that wasn't the person or that wasn't the client for you because they didn't respect your boundaries in the first place.
Good point. And and one of the things that I say with a lot of my clients and corporate clients when they're learning some new communication skills is I tell them, like, practice this at home
Yeah.
with your family, with your friends, so that you get comfortable with it before you bring it into the office.
100%.
which is fun.
But when you've been doing this for a long time, I stopped practicing years ago. I was doing a session last summer and my girlfriend was like, "Hey, are you going to practice?" I'm like, "I don't practice. It's more, I want it to feel natural and authentic." So every course is different. Even though I'm running the same course over and over again, everything's always going to be different. So I think it is practicing, but then by practicing, you build your confidence in your message. And that kind of alleviates the need for practicing moving forward a lot of times. And to your point, the two biggest skills in a leadership position, in my opinion, are public speaking and emotional intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
But people don't get hired for those skills. People get hired for their knowledge, but they can't convert that knowledge. I was on another podcast last month, and afterwards, the person told me, he said, "I have so many people on here with great information and do not know how to deliver it whatsoever." Delivery is as important or maybe more important than the actual message.
And I think one of the problems that corporations have is they hire resumes and we fire personalities. And it really should be
Sure.
the other way around. To be
I like that.
hiring a personality that's, you know what? I think this person's trainable.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the professional associations that I work with, I was always trying to convince them, hey, if you want these chief auditors to come speak, great, because they've got a great message. But you need to train them on how to speak in the first place, or it's never going to work. And so a lot of these guys have great messages and read from the slides, are monotone, stare down at the slide deck. People aren't going to care about your message when you're doing that.
Yeah. Boring,
Boring.
boring when
Very
everybody
boring.
sounds the same.
You check out really quick. And I bet you feel the same way. If when I'm sitting in a training, which I don't do often, but when I'm sitting in one, if that person isn't fantastic and interactive, I'm out. I'm done. I can't give them more than 5 minutes at that point.
Right. This is what I teach my corporate clients is you need to stand out in a busy corporate environment. This is how you're going to get promoted. I want you to sound different, speak differently, and that's how your future boss is going to be like, I want that person on my team as soon as I have an opening.
When I talk to, we do a little bit of executive recruiting, and I always tell people, what is going to make you different from the other candidates? Because everybody can do this job, but how do you do it better? So yeah, that's standing out. And I don't know if I kind of subscribe to the Skip Bayless method of speaking. And do you know what that is?
No.
He says ridiculous things that he doesn't really believe in, but just to get the crowd and people interacting. And so I will do that on occasion. I'll start with a critical thinking course I did last week. I said, hey, can you actually teach people to be a critical thinker, or is it inherent? And we had a lot of debate on that right away. And I think you can teach people, but some people have more capability of being a better critical thinker than others. But I like starting with a question or just something provocative to get people engaged. And so that seems to work with me. But to your point, people have to have some uniqueness and something that makes them stand out, or people aren't going to remember them.
I always tell people your opening has to be something that is so compelling that it people put their phones down.
Yeah.
You want the audience to lean in so that they forget about the bing, the buzz. Oh my God, this is it's the pattern interrupt. That's what it is. And we need more pattern interrupts because this is a very busy world, a very busy, noisy world.
So when I first decided to get into this industry almost 20 years ago, I was sitting in a class. The lady started with, hey, I'm a emergency speaker. I don't know this topic at all, so we're going to learn it together. I gave her 2 minutes and I said, okay, I want a refund. I'm not sitting through this. And what's the point? So right away, it was just and I felt bad for her because she was in a difficult situation. But you can't,
Mm.
with that, you're going to lose your audience immediately.
No, that would be like going to the car dealership and trying to buy a used car. Let me tell you all the bad things about this particular car.
That's exactly, it's a great analogy.
Huh. Okay, so speaking of communication, there was a very unique time about 6 years ago, around this time, where it literally changed communication. Zoom was not a household name. It quickly became a household name. And God, I'm not even sure like how to word it. I felt like the habits that human beings learned in a short period of time have lingered
Yes.
for years.
100% agree with you.
And the people that I feel that I sympathize more with are younger people that were teenagers because it was such an important time in their life to learn some skills that they would use for a lifetime. Unlike myself, who was just like, well, okay, like this is going to pass. And I still know how to walk up to somebody, put out my hand and
Mhm.
say, hi, I'm Laurie-Ann. Whereas there's literally people who still stand back and they're not sure what to do. And I think what we as human beings have learned some bad habits.
Ryan, I can't agree with you more. My kids are 19 and 17 now. And
Mhm.
so you take it back, they were 13 and 11. And luckily, they had a dad that does professional speaking. So they didn't really hurt themselves from a communication standpoint. But a lot of their classmates did. And you're right. I feel bad for the youth today because that's such a growth opportunity over those years that they didn't get because they were sitting at home. One of the reasons why our business has thrived is because we're good at interacting on Zoom. We try to simulate that live environment as much as possible. There's a lot of people I've been told that can't do that and their businesses failed. Ours increased exponentially over that. But I want to go back to what you said about just greeting people. I think people struggle with that still. I mean, that's one of those lingering things that I don't want to shake hands. And again, I'm going to be respectful, but the handshake isn't going away anytime in the near future. And you just got to get comfortable with it again. And so there's a lot of little things. And I think people became more keyboard warriors and were a lot more brazen with their comments. And then when they get in person, they tend to hesitate and pull back. And you should still treat any interaction like the one we're having now as live. It shouldn't be any different. But again, people do. And we did learn a lot of bad habits that are slowly lingering. Writing habits as well, too. I mean, we've been doing a lot of writing classes over the past 3 or 4 years because of that.
Yeah, people have to learn how to re-communicate. And communication is not just the words that we say or the words that we write. I mean, the handshake, this is body language. Are you being closed off? Are you looking at your, oh my goodness, going to networking events and people are like down on their phones? Okay, I won't talk to you.
Yeah, no, yet again, it's people get offended when I say this, but everybody became a little lazier during COVID and is still a little lazier than they used to be. Because again, we were forced out of the house. Now we can sit at home. I'm not complaining. I'm loving this. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Being able to do my work and sit at home in shorts, awesome. Not going to complain. But a lot of people, if I have a chance to go meet with someone in person versus over Zoom and it's 10 minutes away, I don't know if I want to go. I'm just going to sit at home and it's that there's that kind of attitude has got to change in order to redevelop those communication skills.
Yes, yes. We need to learn new skills, new habits, definitely new habits. So back to your book, what would you say was the easiest chapter for you to write and the hardest chapter for you to write?
We have something, and I can't remember which chapter, but I would say the asshole energy spectrum was the easiest for me to write because it's a natural progression. You got 4 levels where I start to set boundaries, and if you don't respect them, again, then we have the nuclear option, which again, that's not what you're going for, but you've got to realize it's necessary. And going back to our previous conversation, conflict management, people struggle even more so today with conflict. So the asshole energy spectrum really helps people understand what are my boundaries and what I'm comfortable with versus what not. I would say that was the easiest. The hardest chapter, I don't know. I love writing, and so I didn't really look at any of the chapters being difficult. It's more I'm a more fluid, free-flowing writer, and I just love writing. I'm writing another book right now just because I want to. And so I wouldn't say many of the chapters were necessarily hard.
Okay. Okay. When I wrote my first book, it was Rethink Leadership: 4 Lessons to Make You Remarkable. I came up with the title first. And I was like, okay, so what are the 4 lessons? So then I figured out what the 4 lessons were. And I was just like, okay, what order do they need to go in? And that was because it was written as a parable, a modern day parable. I was able to, didn't have to write it from beginning to end. I could write it from whichever chapter I felt like writing. And I just noticed the last chapter, I was just like, why am I struggling? Like, why do I keep procrastinating on this? So that's why I think there's always a favorite chapter and always a chapter that might have been like, a little more difficult than the others.
With your elaboration, let me speak to that a little bit. The chapters that really focus more on the case studies we did were more difficult to write because I write from a first person standpoint a lot of time. I don't write in first person, but I write from the standpoint. I wrote a series of books called People-Centric Skills that are fictional stories about a public speaker in different situations. Basically, it was my life story. It was my co-author's idea to do it that way, but it was all real world experiences from both of us combined into one person. So that made it so much easier and natural to write.
Very nice. Very nice. So if you had to leave the audience with, here's one tip, here's one gold nugget that you want everybody to walk away with, what would that be?
Funny you just said gold nugget because that's exactly what I call them because my last name. Let me comment on that real quick. I think a mistake public speakers make all the time is they end with questions. You should never end with questions. And you know what's funny is when I tell people this, they're shocked. I'm like, you need questions. You end with your key points. You ask for questions before then, and then you come up with, here's my 3 gold nuggets that I'm going to leave you with. And again, unless you're a refined public speaker, nobody does that. So that's one piece of advice I would leave you guys with.
Always. And the reason always surprises people, and I've seen this happen before because I've been in the audience, somebody might ask you a question that has nothing to do with what you were talking about, and then you're up there saying, "I don't know." And those people in the audience are saying, "She doesn't know the answer?"
And that's the last thing they heard from the last thing.
That is. That is. So I always tell people, you always end with your words.
I can't agree more. And again, I don't see a lot of people doing that. Going back to the book, I would say a couple of gold nuggets from it are understand who's going to or who is in your life taking advantage of you versus someone that you love and care for and you're okay with those boundaries. Learn how to set boundaries with every person in your life. My son, for example, freshman in college, I set some financial boundaries with him. We're still working on them, but he's gotten a lot better. And I told him, I said, you got to figure this out. It's not my responsibility to pay for your girlfriend's dinners. That's a whole different conversation. But learning how to set boundaries with everyone in your life. And then one thing I would just leave you with, you talked about practicing a lot. I think in the morning, look in the mirror and say, I'm going to say no to somebody today. It could be at Starbucks. It could be at work. It could be your loved ones. It doesn't matter. But I'm going to say no to someone. We also have in our culture a need to explain ourselves and rationalize our behavior. Sometimes, no, I can't do that is enough.
Correct. And I love to tell my clients that I have a hard time with setting those boundaries. It's okay to say, thank you. I'm flattered that you thought of me. And that's where you can say, let me check my calendar. I'll get back to you. So that you have that space and you don't feel so pressured to say yes. Or you say, thank you so much. I'm so flattered, but my schedule is just like too full right now.
I had a client a couple of weeks ago basically offer half of my rate. That's all they could pay. And I'm not interested in doing that. So I offered some of my other speakers that maybe we can make this work. She's like, no, I want you. And I said, look, I'm not going to do it for that rate. However, if you can book 3 other gigs at different chapters around your area for full rates, then I'll do yours for a little cheaper. And so she's working on it. But again, that was my counter proposal. I didn't necessarily say no, but I know my boundaries and I'm not going to get on a plane for X amount when it's not enough of my time.
Right. Right. Again, boundaries. You don't mean to be an a-hole, but it's just practical. Sometimes it's just business.
And Laurie-Ann, the thing is that people don't understand when you set boundaries, people learn to respect you more
Yes.
because you can set those boundaries and have an idea of who you are versus just pleasing others.
Yes. Danny, this has been such an awesome conversation. Where can people learn about you, follow you, grab a copy of your book, all that good stuff?
So you can get the book on Amazon. You can also go to littlebitahole.com and you can buy one from us in North America. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Just go put in the search engine, Danny M. Goldberg. And my main training website is goldsrd.com. Gold is and then samrickydavid.com.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And if we buy the book directly from you, does it get autographed?
I will devalue the book and autograph it for you.
I have a whole shelf of autographed books, mostly from my clients, but I do value those that have
100%.
signatures.
I'm the same. I've got a shelf in my office the same.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Danny, so much for coming on the show and talking about your book and just having this great conversation about communication and also a little bit about body language and mostly boundaries. So I hope that everybody is walking away with 1 or 2 gold nuggets from this particular conversation. And all of the links to connect with Danny and find his book, that'll all be down in the show notes. And until next week, I want you to be in demand.